Hey YouTube, this video we're gonna create another AI designed website. It's sort of a choose your own adventure. I took a few different approaches at this one. So I wanted to play around with Spline, which is a web-based 3D editor. And so the first part of the video, we're actually gonna create it with no code, just using the Spline editor tool, and then export that as HTML. But if you wanna see me create it in Three.js, in the second part of the video, I'd create it completely with code using Three.js because I wanted to see how I would use that approach as well. And then at the end of the video, we'll do all the HTML, CSS, UI layout. I'll put all the timestamps in the description, so thanks for watching. Here's the prompt and settings used inside Midjourney. So this is Spline. You can access it at spline.design, and we can just go ahead and import an image in here and place it into our scene. And then place a sphere and position it where we want it aligned with the image. Then you can go to the material and switch from color to gradient. And here you can actually set the gradient and choose the color for it. You can pick any color you want, but we're gonna go down and choose the eyedropper to select colors out of the image. Then we can adjust the gradient's angle to match. Then we can just copy and paste the sphere, move it around, and do the same thing for all the others. So for these complex background shape, I'm going to use the pen tool to draw a path. And I'm going to click and drag these Bezier handles out to get nice curves. And I'm trying to trace the middle of the path. Then we click the button Convert to Path. And you'll see we have this nice extrusion. Now we can go down to our extrusion settings and set the shape to be a star. Then we're going to bump the sides way up to like 40. And we can play around with the start and end scale values and also adjust the size of it. Just trying to get it to match the image a bit closer. It also has a twist value, which we can bump way up to get it nice and twisty. And there's some other properties you can play with too. Next, we want to go down to material and switch from color to noise. Then we can choose that material and select the colors, again using the color picker. Then we can turn the scale way up and play around with the colors a bit more to try and get it to match the visuals. Then we can play with other material values like the lighting and the shininess. And then we can mess around with the position of the lights within the scene. Once that's looking good, we can choose export and then choose code export. And in the drop-down, we'll select Three.js. Then you can click download zip, name your file, and there we've already got our content in a 3D website. So now we're gonna recreate it with Three.js. So the first thing I'm gonna do is change the version of Three.js because I wanna use this library I found called Mod3, which allows us to do some cool geometry manipulation effects. So I'm using version 110 of Three.js because it seems to work better with that. And then I'm just going to add in the libraries that I want to use. So like I said, we're going to use Mod3, and then we're going to use the Three.js plugin that Mod3 has, which I'm just calling Three. And then we're going to include a small Perlin noise library, as well as a plugin that I created for Mod3 that uses Perlin noise. So I'm going to include these all in the description through the GitHub repo so you can download them. I'm also including Dat.GUI so we can manipulate some parameters live. And then I'm just going to go in and clear out all the JavaScript code. So now we're just going to set up a basic Three.js scene. So now we're just going to create our animation loop that calls render on animation frame, and then we'll make sure to call that method initially just to set off the loop. So I'm going to start getting things set up just by adding a basic test queue. I forgot to set the CSS height of the canvas element, which is why things were kind of offset there for a second. So now we're going to create our custom shape, which is really going to be a star with 100 points to it. And we're going to extrude this later. So really we just need to create a circle that has an alternating radius between the inner radius of the star and the outer radius. So to see it, we just need to replace it with shape geometry, and we'll need to rotate it so that you can actually see it, so it's not just flat. So the next thing we need to do is extrude the shape. So we're going to use our extrude settings, which are going to set the steps and the depth of our extrusion as well as other parameters. we're also setting an extrude path, which are just some points along which we want the extrusion to occur. So kind of a curved shape that we're making with it. Then we replace our shape geometry with our extrude geometry. And we should see our shape. Now we're going to replace our material with a mesh physical material, and this will give us a lot more control over how it actually looks. I'm also using a texture that I want to load for the map, the texture map that we're going to use on this material. And we're going to make sure that this repeats, because we want it to kind of scale and move over time. So we're going to set repeat wrapping and then have the texture repeat. Then we just add the map. It's not showing up here because I didn't add any lights yet, so let's add our ambient light. There we go. Now we just need to adjust the scaling of that texture. Now we can just set a delta variable and increment it in our animation loop and use that to adjust the X and Y offset of our texture. So here's where I want to use mod 3 to actually distort our shape. So the way that this works is you actually create a modifier stack, and then you add these different modifiers to it. And it includes a few modifiers, and then I created one that we're going to use as well. So we'll create our modifier stack, and then we pass in the library that we're using. Remember, we had to add the Three.js plugin that goes along with it, and we specify the object that we're applying the modifier to. So the first modifier we're going to use is a taper, and this is going to have it sort of fade off or taper and shrink in one specific direction on one axis. So this is causing it to taper along the z-axis. Then we add the modifier to the stack, and then we need to apply the stack. And now you can see it tapers off. We're going to add another taper that actually makes it wider on the other end. Now we're going to add a modifier that twists the mesh. The last modifier we're going to do is a noise modifier that I sort of customized and takes a noise input, like a 2D Perlin noise input. And this is going to allow us to distort our mesh over time. So it takes in a noise function, so we're just going to use Copilot here to generate a 2D noise function for us. And if we call apply on the stack inside of our animation loop, you'll see the effect animates over time. So I'm going to add those hemisphere lights back on, and you can see they're a little harsh right now, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some fog to our scene, and this will cause it to sort of the light to taper and fade into the distance. So right now it's black, but we can actually have it match the background color in our HTML, and it'll blend in quite nicely. So that now that that's in good shape, I want to add all the circles and some lights. So those spheres that float around. So I'm going to add a configuration file to manage these. And I'm doing this because I want to manage them using the Dat.GUI library so that we can actually manipulate it with a UI within our scene and add elements and be able to adjust their values to figure out how to position them correctly. So I'm going to create a lights array and a circles array for these lights and circles that we're going to use within our scene. And these are going to be used both in the UI to manipulate their values that'll be populated, but also within the scene itself that will be updated in real time. So here we're just adding Dat.GUI to our document. Now we're just going to create a folder for our lights, and we'll add one for our circles as well, just so that we can open and close those to keep our UI organized. So here I'm just creating a button that's going to add a new sphere or circle each time you click it, so that we can dynamically add them and play around with their values. So here we're just adding all the properties for each circle within the UI so that we can manipulate it. each animation frame, we're gonna go through each circle in the array, and if it already exists, like if there's a mesh for it, then we're just going to update its attributes. But if it doesn't exist, then we're going to create a new one. So let's try it out. So clicking it adds a sphere. We can't see it yet, but if we bump up the radius, there it is. And then we can adjust its position and radius. We should be able to adjust all the parameters of the circle. So this is helpful because it allows us to play around with these values in real time and add circles and position them and figure out where in the scene we want them exactly. So then we can just go through and add all our different spheres to our scene. So next we can go through for lights and do the exact same thing we did for our spheres. key difference for lights is that we're going to add the helpers so that we can actually see where the lights are within the scene to make it easier to manipulate them and point them and place them where we want. So one last thing we can do is add shadows to our scene. So by causing the lights to cast shadows and the meshes within our scene to receive shadows, you can see how that impacts the visual effect of our scene and the lights. So here we're just gonna build out the CSS and the markup to create the UI elements that sit on top of this interface. And this is the end result. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I know this was a long one. Thanks for making it all the way through. This really wasn't a comparison between like Spline and Three.js, because Spline is really just a tool that outputs Three.js, and I think there's a lot of potential there for like building things in Spline and then manipulating them and editing them in Three.js. I think there's some really cool workflow potentials there. I just kind of wanted to show the two different approaches, and you could easily take the output that we got from Spline and then apply something like Mod 3 or like, you know, some of the other effects we did within Three.js to that scene as well. So just fun stuff. Thanks for checking it out.